Welcome to First Responder Friday. My name is Conrad Weaver. I'm your host for the program today, and today is Friday, August 28th, and we are going to be joined in a little bit by a special guest, and I'll introduce her in just a minute. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about who I am. So I'm a film producer and director of documentary films. I have a film that came out a couple years ago called Heroine's Grip, and that is what's kind of sponsoring and underwriting this program today. If you want to check out Heroine's Grip, the stories from the front lines of the heroin and opioid crisis, check it out on Amazon Prime, and you can download it there. You can also go to heroinesgrip.com, order a DVD or a Blu-ray disc, and check it out. Really compelling story, and it's really kind of the foundation for where our new project, PTSD 911, came from. And this is a new film that I'm working on that's in development. And if you're on our Facebook page and you have followed it, I want to say thank you. Thank you for joining us there and following the project and supporting it in any way. If you have an interest in first responders and in helping first responders be healthy, I invite you to join us in sponsoring and underwriting the film project. So if you go to ptsd911movie.com, you can check out the whole project. And if you click on Honor a First Responder, that big button there, it'll take you to this page where you can make a donation for $100. That'll put your name and your first responder in the credits. You can also purchase our online streaming premiere for $35. Which will be an exclusive premiere only for our funders. And then you can also put a custom amount. We've had almost $600 this week come in from our friends and people who say yes. We've raised almost a little over $6,000 in the past month through our crowdfunding campaign. So we're really excited that people are getting behind this and supporting this project. So I invite you to do that. Click on the links on ptsd911movie.com, and it'll take you right here to this page. And I just encourage you to support our film and what we're doing with this project. Well, today we have a very special guest joining us, and I'm going to have Leah introduce herself. Leah, welcome to First Responder Friday.
Hi, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. So tell me a little bit about who you are.
So I am a former paramedic with the Chicago Fire Department, kind of turned first responder mental health advocate. So that's kind of the basic gist of who I am.
Yeah. So, wow, paramedic. So you've probably seen some stuff, especially coming out of the Chicago area. That's pretty big agencies there and lots of crazy stuff going on, right?
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. How long?
It's very.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. How long were you a paramedic there in the Chicago area?
So in Chicago, on the fire department, I was there only a few years, only 6 years. But as a whole, I've been a paramedic for just over 15 years now.
Wow. So,
yeah.
Tell us your story. How'd you get into the business of rescuing people as a paramedic?
So, I kind of came across an EMT course while I was in school years back, and kind of fell in love with it. So the job kind of found me. While I was in that course, I ended up taking a paramedic class and got lucky and got onto the department fairly quickly. I started in 2008 with Chicago. I was in a private ambulance company in the South Burbs prior to that, and that was definitely, there was a lot going on in that time too. But I got in Chicago in 2008 and loved it. It was what I was meant to be doing at the time. And, it was really fun to be able to help people and be part of all of the different things, the craziness, really, the chaos and the craziness.
Mm-hmm. What made it fun? I mean, what made it fun to go on calls and be a part of helping people? What was that attraction for you?
So I've always been somebody that likes helping people. So there's always been that attraction of just being able to, provide support and help others when they need you. But in Chicago on the department as a medic, there is this kind of adrenaline rush when you are getting called to, stabbings and gunshots and fires, and you're helping people in their worst situations. And then a lot of times too, you're helping people that are calling because it's a nonsense call. They've had a headache for 3 days, but there was just that adrenaline, that really, that excitement of never knowing what you were going to be getting into, and always coming home with a different story and a different experience. For me, that was amazing. And I also worked with some really amazing people. I had a great partner. I had a bunch of firefighters that I worked very well with. So I really enjoyed all of it. I guess there was no part of it that I disliked,
So in your agencies there, how does it work? Or were you like a separate ambulance company, or were you a part of integrated with the fire station?
We were integrated with the fire station. So I was a single role paramedic. So I was just a paramedic, but our ambulance was out of a firehouse. So we were on 24 hours with a different shift, a fire shift and everything. So we ate with the firefighters. We slept with the firefighters, lived with the firefighters for that 24 hours. They were family, which was pretty cool too.
Yeah. So there's really a camaraderie there with those, with the people you work with, right?
Yes, absolutely. You have to have that camaraderie. You have to have that, build up that respect and that relationship, because these are people whose lives you could be saving potentially. When the firefighters go into a call, you're the medic, you're the ambulance crew that's there to help them. And that's what you're supposed to be doing, and that's it's definitely a family.
So at what point did it kind of begin to wear on you? At what point did things begin to unravel for you?
So in 2010, my partner and I were called to it turned out to be a Mayday, meaning that there were firefighters trapped inside of a building. It was a fire and the wall collapsed. My partner and I were sent to the front of the building. We were the first medic crew on the scene there. And we unfortunately had 2 firefighters that perished in that fire that day. And for me, that was, when you sign up for this job, that there's the potential of that happening. But I don't know if people really comprehend the magnitude of what it feels like when it actually does happen. And so we were in front of the building and we were staging, waiting for somebody to come out. And, across the radio band, we got, hey, there's one coming out. And they brought one of the firefighters that had perished to our stretcher. And there wasn't anything, sorry, there wasn't anything we could do. And but we did everything that we could,
Sure.
And at that moment for me, I actually, I dissociated from the call, from that scene. Everything around me kind of, it sped up, but it slowed down all at the same time. It's really surreal to try to explain. I didn't hear everything, what was going on around me. I went into this kind of autopilot mode, and I remember buckling the firefighter into the stretcher as we were, moving the stretcher down the street. And when we turned, there were all kinds of news and media crew, watching everything we were doing. And I remember telling myself, like, don't let them see that you're kind of scared right now, because you're not supposed to be scared. You're a paramedic. This is what you're trained for, And I remember as I completed that thought, everything went black. I don't remember good chunks of that call. We ended up not transporting that firefighter. We brought him to a closer ambulance that had better access to an exit route. But we stayed on scene. We ended up transporting 2 other firefighters. And the only reason I actually remember that was because I watched it on the news for days after that. And that had to be one of the most surreal things to ever see is, me running down the street with a backboard in my hand and not remembering, knowing that I was there, but not remembering, not remembering that I was in that moment,
Like your brain had just kind of turned that off.
Yes, completely. And it was, my partner and I ended up finishing out that shift. And our next shift, we were told to go to a debriefing, but on our way to the debriefing, we got sent to another call. So we actually missed the debriefing. So there really wasn't, there wasn't this like great big, like, oh my God, how are you? Are you okay? Type thing. And I didn't expect there to be because the call wasn't about me, but I kept telling myself, like, this is, what you're feeling is normal. This is, suck it up, tough this out. But it just was this like gnawing kind of feeling that I had just kind of sitting right at the top of my chest. Like I let my department down. I let my fire department family down because I wasn't able to save this guy. And I still live with that every day, and I still recall the parts of that call that I do remember, So we ended up getting sent home, and we were off for a few days. They finally gave us some time off or whatever. So we got to go to the services and whatnot. And a few months later, I started noticing that when the tones would go off in the firehouse, I was jumping and I was getting startled and I was crying more and I was getting angry and I was getting nervous to go on calls, and things that never had happened to me before. And I started to blame everything else in my life for all of that, because I didn't want to admit that it had anything to do with the job, because I love my job, But that started to get worse and worse and worse, to the point that I actually began to pass out on calls. And my partner had to actually call an ambulance for me while we were on a call because I passed out. And at the time, we kind of thought, oh, maybe it's some, physical ailment or something. And in hindsight and looking back at things, it was a physical manifestation of PTSD. And it was a completely involuntary response, which is, something I think a lot of people don't understand when it comes to PTSD, that it's not the paramedic, not the firefighter just having bad feelings about a call or remembering a call. There are physical things that do happen that are entirely out of, one's control. So I attempted to kind of tough through it, because I didn't want to be that girl that couldn't handle the job. I didn't want to be the weak person. And I was on medical leave for a little while because they thought it was a physical issue. We were trying to figure out what was going on. And my symptoms that I was experiencing had subsided a bit while I was away from, work. And then when I went back, those symptoms kind of came back really, really bad. And we were on a call. We got called one night to a gunshot victim. And actually, prior to the call, we started hearing gunshots going off outside of our firehouse, which is really normal in the area I was working in. So that wasn't, a big deal, but it sounded like the gunshots, the bullets were actually like ricocheting off the building almost. Oh. It was that close. And we ducked and covered in the ambulance, behind the ambulance in the firehouse. And the tones went off, and we got called for the gunshot victim that was literally just around the corner. And we got there, and the patient had been shot in the head, deceased. There was brain matter, so there was nothing we can do to save the patient. And it was outside at like a block party type thing. And the family swarmed around my partner and I and threatened to kill us and started to attack us. And thank God the truck company was with us, and the police showed up to kind of stop people from doing that. But again, that was the second time I dissociated at a call. Like I just kind of went blank. And shortly after that, I was, my chief had asked if I would be willing to work with him as a driver, which is kind of, you're kind of off of the streets. You're more in an administrative kind of role, but you're still going to calls. You're still working on shifts and everything. But it's not the volume of calls that you would, get on an ambulance. And I took that detail because I figured maybe it would give me a little time to process things and kind of, decompress a bit. But instead, having that downtime, it made all of the calls and all of the things that had been sitting in the back of my head kind of come to the surface. And my symptoms had slowly been getting worse and worse. And now in this driver position, they got really bad. And it was while I was in this driver position that I ended up having to go into treatment, and where I was diagnosed with PTSD officially.
Mm-hmm. Did the agency do anything to provide any kind of resources for you?
I can't say that they did, but I didn't go to the agency. I tried to deal with it on my own initially, because there is that stigma that goes with, when you ask for help, you're not supposed to, I'm a paramedic. I'm not supposed to ask for help. So I avoided going to them, asking for resources. But once I did go into treatment, and once they were aware of what I was going through, the resources that were offered were very sparse, and there was definitely a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding of what I was actually going through. And unfortunately, that kind of, I think that could have been, would have been great if they were a little bit more understanding, but at this point it is what it is.
Mm-hmm. So was your kind of unwillingness to come forward, was it out of embarrassment? Was it just out of just fear of what are they going to say? Am I going to lose my job? That kind of thing.
All of the above. Yeah, it was embarrassment. It was fear. It was this notion that I had only been on the job for 6 years, 5 or 6 years at the time. So there's this kind of this joke of, get some time on the job. So I kind of had this feeling of like, I didn't have the right to be experiencing what I was experiencing. I didn't have the right to be asking for help.
So you hadn't worked the job long enough to really, yeah.
In my mind, yes. Now, I was assigned to a firehouse in Inglewood, in Chicago, which happens to be one of the most violent neighborhoods in the state of Illinois, if not the nation. So 1 year in Inglewood is probably equivalent to a good 5 years, in a slower ambulance. So, but it was that whole mentality of, I knew what I was getting myself into, so this shouldn't be bothering me. Like this, I shouldn't be affected by this. And I was afraid. I was very afraid of losing my job. And it finally got to the point where, had I not gone to them, or had I not reached out and asked for help, I was either going to, it was deciding between either losing my job or losing my life, because things had gotten so bad for me that was my next step.
Mm-hmm. Mm. What got you past that then?
So there always has been this little itty bitty light, that is, that doesn't want to end things, that never wanted to die, but wanted to stop feeling the feelings I was feeling, wanted to stop remembering the bad calls, stop re-experiencing the bad calls, I should say, because I think we all remember the bad calls, but re-experiencing them and having flashbacks to them is a very different experience. And I wanted that to stop. So I didn't, like I said, I didn't want to die. So the hope that things could eventually get better was always there. And the hope that I could get back to who I was always there. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's really what got me through. And there was this part of me that was just really felt that if I were to end things, that's kind of the easy way out for me. And I didn't want to go that route. I consider myself a tough broad. So I didn't want to take the easy way out.
Mm-hmm. So after you got some treatment and some help, were you able to then eventually go back to work?
No, that's still a really tough, thing for me to swallow still. So after I got treatment, I had ran out of medical time, and I went through some testing to see if I could go back to work. I still was experiencing PTSD symptoms. I still experience PTSD symptoms to this day. And because of the symptoms I was experiencing, I was considered to be unfit to go back to the job, which is really kind of that's a harsh scarlet letter to kind of have to be labeled, Yeah. But so I wasn't able to, by the department, I wasn't able to go back to the job. And so I was kind of forced then to apply for disability benefits. And this was a kind of a forced decision. It was not an easy decision to make, to go that route. But I was injured because of the job, and I wasn't able to go back to the job. So I went that route, and that was a battle that lasted about 5 years legally in court, and was just last August was finally granted benefits for PTSD.
That just probably added more stress and trauma to your situation, right?
It absolutely added more stress and trauma. Here I'm going through this situation where I am trying to convince myself that I am a strong person and that, I'm not weak and I'm not broken, but at the same time having to prove to this group of people that what I experienced has caused enough damage that I can't go back to that position safely. And not just safely for myself, but safely for other people. Because I think one of the things that people forget is that, if I get triggered and dissociate while on a call in the middle of, a bad call, that for me, it doesn't really matter what happens to me. It is what it is. But if that were to happen, I would end up putting my partner and the patient and any other crew members at risk. And that becomes an issue, and so this wasn't about just me. This was about other people. But it did add to the stress. My insurance benefits were messed with. I had no income. I had to figure out how to pay for my mortgage and, my medications and my treatment without having this income while still experiencing PTSD symptoms, so, and it felt really, it felt like I was kind of pushed away, in a way. I was really hurt by how all of it transpired.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So what's happening now? What's happening today?
So, I'm in a better place. Like I said, I still experience PTSD symptoms. So those are, those wax and wane for me, pretty daily. But I am right now, I'm back in school, studying psychology, doing some research on the effects of trauma on first responders, and trying to work at getting better information out there to help educate other first responders and our departments and our administrations and legislators on how we should be handling first responders. I think by having some information and data points and being able to provide that to the right people, it will help us be able to look at what we could be doing differently to prevent people from, from suicides, to prevent people from losing their jobs, to possibly prevent, PTSD from occurring, and trying to come up with more preventative measures and be more proactive rather than reactive.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that across all the agencies that we're working with, the fire, police, EMS and dispatch, I think you're the first paramedic person that we've had on the program. Do you think that in the culture of the paramedic world, it's really that unspoken thing that it's kind of the big elephant in the room, that there's more people dealing with what you dealt with than what are not?
I do. I think that there is, I should be careful to say that. I think that, like, when it comes to PTSD, I think that there is a spectrum. And when it comes to certain mental health disorders, I do think that there's kind of a spectrum. You're going to have the people that deal with certain things but can still function in their role and still function in their duties. But then there are going to be the people that fall on that one opposite end of the spectrum that, it's disabling for them. Mm-hmm. And I think that there are a lot of people that fall on that, somewhere on that spectrum. And I think that one of the biggest reasons why we don't talk about it so much is because so many people can relate to this stuff. And I think for first responders especially, it's very difficult to have to acknowledge that they might need help or they might not be okay, and
Especially
if
if their job is to offer
yes,
help.
absolutely, and if they acknowledge it in me, then it forces them to kind of look inward and see, okay, this could happen to me too, So I think what happens then is there's this front that gets put up that, well, you're just weak. You just couldn't handle the job. Whatever the case is, and that won't happen to me. I'm going to do this job. I'm this tough guy. I'm inevitable, or invincible. I'm sorry. And I think that kind of perpetuates the stigma then. And I also think, though, that some of the loudest critics of mental health and first responders are very often the ones that are hurting the most. But I think that they're loud about it because if they can distract, then nobody's going to recognize it in them.
Mm-hmm. What do you think needs to happen from just an overall systemic, issue with the systems of the first responders? What needs to happen to really improve this?
So I think that there is so many different things that could happen on different levels. I think first, and most importantly, is the education to first responders of what to notice within themselves and what to notice within others, and to talk in a way that helps to normalize it and take away that stigma. I think recently what I've kind of noticed is we've kind of been on this pendulum that, a few years ago, nobody talked about mental health. And now everybody's talking about mental health. And it's become almost, I don't want to say too normal, but we went from it's part of your job, suck it up, to now it's part of your job, you're going to get a mental health disorder. You're going to have PTSD. And I think we kind of have to get back into the center because not everybody who experiences trauma is going to develop PTSD. So we do have to be very careful how we educate and how we talk about it. I think trying to get more people to be a little bit more open about what they're going through and resources that we're offering to people, be it either better trained EAPs or better trained peer support groups, I think is very important. But I also think that training clinicians is extremely important. I've kind of noticed, and this is just anecdotal, but I've kind of noticed that oftentimes when a first responder goes into a clinician's office, they come out with a PTSD diagnosis. And what seems to happen is because they're a first responder, it's automatically assumed that whatever they're going through is PTSD. And I think that by training clinicians to not just automatically label first responders as having PTSD, but looking at the other mental health disorders that could be playing a role in whatever it is they're going through is really imperative to make sure that the first responders are getting the most effective treatment. Mm-hmm. And I think that training clinicians is important too, because I think sometimes clinicians don't realize that first responders kind of are a different breed. Going into a clinician's office, going into the job, I should say, we kind of have a different brain chemistry and a different makeup just going into it. We're a little messed up, wanting to run into, gunfire and burning buildings and,
most people run the other way, right?
Right. So I think having clinicians that kind of understand that a little bit, can make a big difference too. So, and then I also think that when it comes to departments, looking at are people who are struggling with stuff, and making sure that they're providing them proper resources and not labeling them, not treating, the disruptive, firefighter or the angry police officer as, a problem child or punitively, but really stepping back and looking, okay, is this a mental health issue that's going on? Is this something we could do to address this? Or is this person just being an asshole? We do have to kind of look at that, so I think
what do you wish would have happened with you, in your case?
So that's a tough question, because if they would have provided more resources and better support, I sometimes wonder, if the outcome would have been different. But I also kind of look at my situation and realize that had I not gone through this situation, I wouldn't be where I am today. And because of my legal battle, because of what I went through, there were changes made on the department. There were protocols that changed. People were treated differently after me. There's small changes, and there's a lot more changes that need to happen. But so there is part of me that I sometimes, I don't know if I would have changed anything. But I would love to go back and, if I was better trained, if I was, if somebody pulled me to the side and, talked to me or, checked on me, I think that all would have been great. But that's all speculative. I don't know if any of that would have made a difference,
Was any of this covered in your training when you were training to become a paramedic? Did they talk about mental health at all with you?
No, there was no, we talked about mental health, getting the psych patients, and how to handle a psych patient, but we never talked about what to recognize in yourself. We never talked about, what to recognize in your other, coworkers. This was at the time, like I said, it was very hush hush still at the time. And there were people starting to talk about it. And fortunately now there are more and more people that are starting to talk about it and are starting to bring more light to the topic, which I think is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. That's one thing we're talking with an organization right now with the film to kind of create some resources around the film to help to offer this to agencies who can use it as a training resource.
Yeah,
so we're really excited about that, and we'll be talking more about that in the months to come as we develop the film as the project comes together. But I think that something like this that can be used in agencies, whether no matter what agency you're in, I think it can be a tool that really helps those new recruits, first responders, know how to deal with these situations, to bring it onto the table, put all the cards on the table. Hey,
yes.
This is what you may encounter. You may encounter where you're doing CPR on your coworker. You may encounter, somebody shooting at you. You may encounter these things, and here's how to deal with that.
And I think it's important too to acknowledge that it might be the little mundane everyday call that gets to you. It might be the little grandma that passed away in her sleep that really isn't a traumatic call, but because she looked like your grandma, like that might affect you. I think trying to get to the people that are coming on thinking, well, this is never going to happen to me. Like, I like this. That only happens to people who just don't like their job or whatever the case is. I think really just putting it out there and letting them see more and more people having the discussion and having an educated discussion too. I think that that's super important. But I also think too that there's a lot of loudmouths out there that still critique this and still talk bad about all this. And I kind of think that they are helping in a way, because at least they have a conversation, whether it be a good conversation or a bad conversation about it. At least they're having a conversation, and somebody else might be hearing what they're saying and thinking, wow, that doesn't make sense. Like that's dumb, and somebody else might be able to say like, well, hey, no, here's statistics, or here is this. And it might help move the conversation forward, So I think sometimes bad conversations are even worth having.
Yeah, I think that's something that I think our forum with this program, with this show, can help that move that conversation forward. And
yes,
and having people on like you who have experienced this firsthand, I think, is really a powerful thing. And I want to say, first of all, to thank you for your service, for your time of service that you've done, and I'm sorry that you went through these challenges, but I'm glad that you're taking those and turning them on its head and saying, hey, how can I reach back to help the next person up? That's really amazing that you're willing and able to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so and then going into, I studied psychology way back years ago. So, this is kind of close to my heart as well, but just having you then say, hey, you know what, I'm going to go get a degree in psychology. I'm going to study this so that I can help the next person, I think is pretty cool.
Thank you. Yeah. I feel like, sometimes messed up people are able to best help messed up people, so.
In my last project that I talked about earlier, Heroin's Grip, I worked with a lot of people in recovery, and they said, you know what, you really can't help someone who's been addicted to heroin unless you've experienced it.
Yes.
You understand what they're going through. And so in your case, you understand what that paramedic, what that firefighter, what that first responder is dealing with. And so you're much better able to reach back and help them along.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my goal.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just wish you the very best with that. And
Thank you.
What's the next big thing for you? What's happening next in your world?
Well, so like I said, I'm in the process of doing some research. I just put out a questionnaire that I am circulating, trying to get first responders, paramedics, and firefighters specifically to reply and give their input. It is a pretty heavy, questionnaire, but it has all of the intentions of being able to provide valuable information, in the future. I'm specifically looking at comparing firefighters to paramedics and to dual role to see if there are differences in the calls that they go on, the nature of the calls, the amount of the calls and everything, to see if there is a difference. So I'm working on that now. I am set to graduate undergrad in December, and
awesome.
I'm kind of excited, a little scared, but and then working on trying to get into grad school. I am hoping to be able to pursue my PhD in psychology with a focus in trauma, and really specifically want to work with first responders and be able to provide, like I said, the education that goes with what it means to be a first responder.
I need to connect you to Dr. Michelle Dooley. She's at the Northern Illinois University or one of those schools like that. So she's probably close to you. And
yes,
has done some of the leading research on PTSD with dispatch. And so
that is actually my number one choice right now, where I'm trying to get accepted to. So that would be fantastic.
Well, I'll make a connection and
fantastic.
We'll do that offline and see if we can get you connected to her, because she's
perfect.
Amazing. And she just actually released a new white paper this week about this very subject. So I'll have to send that to you.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I really appreciate you joining the program today and telling your story. I know it's not always easy to tell one's own personal story. So thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you for having me.
And being willing to kind of let us see behind the curtain and to see what's going on there. So
I appreciate it. Yeah. I appreciate you having me. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. You have been watching First Responder Friday. My name is Conrad Weaver. I've been your host for this program today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing it with your network and sharing our page here on PTSD 911 movie. I really appreciate your support and appreciate your encouragement and all the notes that we get from first responders around the country. Thank you for doing that. And thank you for sharing this with your network again. Coming up next week, we have a very special guest. His name is Adam Davis, and he is a former law enforcement officer out of Alabama, and I think you'll enjoy his Southern accent. So be sure to join us next Friday where we'll be talking about spirituality and trauma. And he's got a number of resources that are really amazing in helping first responders deal with the traumas that they deal with. So that's coming up next week on First Responder Friday. My name is Conrad Weaver, and this has been First Responder Friday right here on PTSD 911 documentary Facebook page and YouTube. Join us again next week. Thanks for watching.